Howdy. I'm here to follow up on a video that my wife posted about some boots that she found at a thrift store. We're going to go ahead and clean these up, refinish the leather, and get these ready for sale to their new home. I'll start off by just kind of highlighting the condition these were found in. Lots and lots of dust and debris all over them, so we're going to get that cleaned off. The leather here is a nice kind of reddish hue to it. Overall in great condition. I don't see any major cuts or anything like that. So we're gonna walk through the process of how I would go about cleaning these and getting them ready. I'm gonna use a few products today that I highly recommend. I'm not endorsed by these in any way, shape, or form, but I did want to just share the process with you. First off is a horse hair brush. Just want something that has stiff bristles. It's gonna help you get a lot of the dust off. Next up, we're gonna re-hydrate the leather. I use Renovateur by Saphir for this. And then the last step I'll do today is a little bit of polish, also with a product from Saphir. This one here, and for this, I don't have, they make a reddish color. I don't have that. I don't do a lot of red leather, but I'm gonna use this neutral color to finish the process. So the first thing that was really helpful for storing this boot is whoever donated these to the thrift store stuffed them and kept the leather shape in really great condition. I'm going to take that out just for the purposes of doing some of the cleaning so I can get better manipulation around. But if you have shoe trees or anything like that, you can keep them in for this process. The first thing I like to do is just a dry brush. Take off any of the dust that may be on there. Try and get out as many spots as we can, but then we'll go back through with a lint-free cloth, a little bit of mild detergent, maybe like a dish soap, and clean off some of these other spots. But we want to get all the extraneous dust off first, really work around the heel and the sole of this boot. The brand of this boot is Frye, so really high quality leather that's in use here. Should polish up really, really nicely when we're all done. Okay, well, I got most of the dust off, which thankfully was not a ton, but I still have a lot of discoloration on this leather from some water spots or some previous use. So I'm gonna grab a cloth I prepared here with just lint-free cloth, and I'm just gonna give it a little wipe down. This has got a tiny bit of dish soap on it, but really is mostly water. Material that's not going to damage the leather, but one that's just going to take off the spots. Now I'm going to just kind of massage through as much of these spots as we can, get these all cleaned up. I'll also take to the actual heel itself and a little bit on the sole, which is also leather from this particular boot. Looks like they have a Goodyear welt style shoe here, so really a great shoe that could last a lifetime if properly cared for. And hopefully this cleaning is the first step to a wonderful new home. And in this stage, I'm not worried about getting everything really fully polished off here and totally cleaned. I'm gonna rehydrate the leather using the Renovateur product that I mentioned earlier. And then we're gonna let that set in, and then we'll do another deep cleaning following that. All right, I think that looks good enough for this stage here. So as you can see, really got a lot of that stuff off. There's still some discoloration here where it really was set in, but it's off the surface. So we're gonna go ahead and proceed with the hydration step next. So for this, I use the Renovateur product, as I mentioned. I personally just dab it on my finger and kind of go over the shoe. I use this pretty liberally. It's not the cheapest of products, but I just kind of work it into the leather, really focusing on areas of stitching. And with this product in particular, for a shoe that I don't know when it was last really taken care of. The leather may absorb quite a bit of this, so I may have to go back and reapply pretty regularly. But I just kind of work it into the leather using my fingers. And then once I've gone over the entire shoe, I will let this dry on for approximately 5 minutes. Might do another coat of this on this particular shoe, and then we'll come back and do another round of the cleaning, and then we'll do a final round of the polishing. So I'll pause here for a bit, go ahead and finish this process across the shoe, let it dry, and when I come back I'll confirm how many coats I put on, as well as how long I did let it dry for. One last thing I'll mention before pausing though is I do like to use the Renovateur on some of the sole as well. It really polishes up some of the wood. The wood is also an organic product, and hydration levels can change a lot. So giving it a little bit of extra liquid and reinforcement is really a great way to make it finish up really nicely and look and last a long time. So I'll be back shortly. Thank you. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes after I put on a full coat. I did just do one coat. After the application, most of it has really been absorbed entirely into the leather. There are a few areas around some of the leather seams where it didn't quite get absorbed in, but I put a lot of excess in these areas just to make sure it got soaked in. The next thing I'm going to do is go back to my horsehair brush, same one I used before, just go over the entire shoe again, clean off any of the remnants of the Renovateur product, and then we'll apply a little bit of polish after that and take a look and see how they're doing. So with this process, I like to really get into all the edges as well. Anywhere that there was excess of that Renovateur product, just get it to soak into some of the nooks and crannies and corners. That'll really help restore the areas that are going to be the most fragile. The areas that have a lot of surface area and are just kind of flat are going to be the most robust pieces of the leather, but the areas that have seams and were previously cut have the most opportunity for penetration and stuff, foreign materials getting inside there, and that leather coming apart. So we'll pay particularly close attention to those areas there. And I'll do the heel as well, since I applied some product there. Okay. And don't be afraid to be pretty rough on the leather at this stage. It doesn't have a lot of visible cracks or anything like that. It has been rehydrated a little bit, so using this stiff brush is able to really create a little bit of a shine already, even though we haven't added any polish, just with the hydration step that's in place. All right, so before I do the polish, I'll give a little bit of a before and after here. I've only worked on one shoe. So this is the right boot that's been polished up, and here's a look at what the original matching boot looked like as well. So really a lot of great progress so far, but let's go ahead and add some polish. So for this, again, I'm using the other Saphir product I mentioned at the start, the Cordovan, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I'm using a neutral color. They do make it in red, as I mentioned as well. But I don't have a lot of red leather, so I keep the neutral on hand as an alternative. I use a lot of brown for my own personal shoes and so forth, less black. For this, I am going to use a chamois. Lint-free cloth will work for this as well. Really something that is soft, but instead of applying directly to my fingers, I'm going to take a couple of my fingers, put them together just to create a pad, and then I'm going to dab that in the product and apply pretty liberally to the shoe as well. We'll let that sit in also about 5 minutes, and then after that we'll do another round of polishing with the brush. With this product as well, feel free to apply pretty liberally, so even in areas where there's a lot of stitching, I can apply right over that and then kind of buff out to some of these other areas. With the areas that look like I've gotten too much or anything like that, I can just go back to those to kind of reapply onto my chamois itself before going back to my actual can. And all of the areas that are filled in around any of the stitching or anything like that, that's all going to come out just like we saw with the other product, if there's any excess at the end when we use our brush to polish. So I'll do one coat of this as well and then let it dry for about 5 minutes and then be back to show the final brushing and the final results. And howdy again, I've got our boot here. It's been about 5 minutes since I applied our polish, and I'm ready to give it a brush. And this will be our final step. Again, just like in the last stages, really focusing heavily on the areas that have stitching, any connectivity between one piece of the leather to another. Just make sure that we get out any of that polish. And in order to get a shine, I'm really putting a lot of pressure against my arm that I have inside the boot and brushing pretty vigorously. Really want to give this a little bit of a shine with this polish. It's not a hard wax, so I'm not looking for like a mirror finish or anything like that, but definitely want to give it a lot of friction and let this boot get polished. So we'll just go over the whole surface area in this nature, and then we'll have one final comparison look of the before and after. And if I'm not satisfied with that, I may go through the whole process again. I already have to do it for the second boot, but I've kept that one off to the side just for easy comparison. If you do this on both pairs, really the process takes maybe 30 minutes overall. You can, while you're working on one boot, letting the other boot dry for the 5-minute period is just about enough time for some of these larger surface area boots. If you're doing a pair of shoes or something like that, a lot less time is needed for the application, so you may have a little bit of downtime in between. But that's the entire process that I would run through to do any sort of restoration, or even to keep my own shoes and leather goods just looking their best. Keep them hydrated as often as I can. Anytime I can prevent cracking or prevent any deterioration is a lot better than trying to fix it after the fact. All right, I think this is looking pretty good. So I do have still a little bit of area right on the seam here that probably could go from another round of hydration. So I may consider doing that while I do the second boot, and also learn from what we did on this boot, just with some of the areas that were tricky to work on around some of these other seams. But I think that looks pretty good for our first pass. So here's one last comparison view here of our polished, ready to go, ready to wear Frye boot versus the original condition we found it in directly from the thrift store. So hope you enjoyed this. I'll share some links to the products that I used. Again, not sponsored by them, but just stuff that I use. And next time you're at the thrift store and you see a pair of leather goods that looks a little bit worse for wear, like this boot did, you may think twice about picking it up, because with a little bit of elbow grease and the right product, it can look like almost a brand new shoe. And it's a high quality good like this, made by Frye, as I mentioned, is really going to last a lifetime if it's well cared for. And even if it's neglected for a long period of time, you can bring it back to great condition. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing, and please let us know in the comments if this was helpful, or if you have any other tips that you use to restore these goods or other goods that you pick up at really great prices. Thanks, folks.